Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we have a truly fascinating game from round 4 of the 2026 FIDE World Team Rapid and Blitz Chess Championships. Playing with the white pieces, we have the brilliant Greek Grandmaster Nikolas Theodorou representing Team International Trading. Theodorou is a powerhouse on the rise, known for his razor-sharp tactical vision and highly solid positional understanding. And across the board, piloting the black pieces, we have none other than the former World Chess Champion Ding Liren. Meanwhile, Ding is representing Team Dragon chilling. In this star-studded event, Ding needs no introduction. His deep calculation and endgame mastery are legendary, but lately his form has been a roller coaster, making every single one of his games must-watch television. In this matchup, we have a classic David versus Goliath setup on paper, but in rapid chess, anything can happen. So let's jump straight into the game. Playing with the white pieces, Nikolas go for d4 and knight to f6 and c4 e6. Knight to f3 and d5 and knight to c3 and bishop to b4. We have a queen's gambit declined, a Ragozin defense variation. This is a highly respected flexible opening choice at the elite level. Black develops the dark squared bishop actively to pin the knight on c3, aiming for active piece play and immediate pressure in the center rather than a passive defensive setup. Now queen to b3, attacking the bishop, an aggressive classical response by Theodorou. White immediately forces the question on the b4 bishop while keeping an eye on the d5 and b7 squares. Now c5, supporting the bishop. Now d takes a c5 and knight to c6, supporting the bishop. Now bishop to g5, queen to a5, putting pressure on the c3 square. Ding Liren plays dynamically. He refuses to take back on c5 immediately and instead bring his queen out to step up the pressure on the c3 knight. The position is already getting structurally messy and highly tactical. Now bishop takes f6 and d takes c4. Now queen takes c4, g takes f6. Now rook to c1, queen takes c5. Now queen to f4. Theodorou smartly avoids a queen trade that would ease black's defensive tasks by pulling the queen back to f4. He hits the weakened f6 pawn and keeps the black king slightly uncomfortable in the center. Now king to e7, supporting the f6 pawn. Now g3 and e5, attacking the queen. Now queen goes to h6. Now bishop to c3 check and b takes c3. Ding decides to part with his prized dark squared bishop to damage white's queenside pawn structure. In return, however, Theodorou secures the bishop pair and an open b file for future operations. Now e4, attacking the knight on f3. Now knight to d2 and e3. A very provocative pawn sacrifice by the world champion. Ding wants to dynamically tear open white's center and disrupt the king's safety before white can castle. However, the engine looks at this with a cold heart and deem it as a bit too optimistic. Now queen takes f6 check, an elegant standard tactical shot by Theodorou, but beautiful nonetheless. He snaps off the pawn because if black plays king to f6, white responds with the devastating royal fork knight to e4, winning back the queen with a massive material and structural advantage. Now king takes f6 and knight to e4 check. Now king to e7 and knight takes c5, attacking the knight. Now knight to d3 and bishop to e6. Now f takes e3 and rook a to c8. The dust has settled from the tactical skirmish. Theodorou has emerged a clean pawn up. While the white c and e pawns are doubled and isolated, they still represent extra material. Ding is relying purely on his active rooks and knights for compensation. Now bishop to g2 and knight to a5, eyeing the c4 square. Now knight to b4 and a rook to c5. Now rook to f1. White places his rook on the open file. Now knight to c4, attacking the pawn on e3. Now rook to f4 and knight takes e3. Now bishop to b7 and rook to c7, attacking the bishop. Now bishop goes to f3. Theodorou handles the defensive phase beautifully. He gives back one of his doubled pawns to perfectly consolidate his pieces, keeping his core extra pawn while restricting black's counterplay. Now a5 attacking the knight, a major structural mistake by Ding Liren. He pushes the a pawn to kick the knight, but this severely weakens his own queen side, specifically the b6 pawn and the c6 square. In a tough position, the computer preferred a quiet, patiently safety move like king to f8, knight to c6 check. Now king goes h8 and rook to b1 attacking the pawn on b6. Now knight to d5 supporting the pawn. Another inaccuracy by Ding, born entirely from intense time pressure. Ding was down to just over a minute on his clock here. Moving the knight away lets the white pieces fled into the queen side, and knight to c4 was required to keep fighting. Now bishop takes a d5 and bishop takes a d5. Now knight to d4 and rook to b7. Now rook to f6. Now bishop takes a2 attacking the rook. Rook b takes a b6 and rook takes a b6 and then rook takes b6. Theodorou ruthlessly liquidates into a winning endgame. The queen side is cleared out. White's passed c pawn is going to be an absolute monster. Now king to e7 and a rook to a6 attacking the pawn on a5 and a rook to c8 attacking the pawn. Now rook takes a5 and bishop to b1, king to d2 and bishop to g6, g4 and h6. Now h4, king to f6 and rook a6 check. Now king goes to g7, stepping back into a passive box. King to e5 offered far more active resistance, though white's position remained structurally winning. Now h5 attacking the bishop. Now bishop goes to e4. Now knight to f6 check. Now bishop takes f5 and g takes f5. Theodorou transitions into a fundamentally winning rook and pawn endgame. White's advanced protected f-pawn and the outside passed c-pawn create an overwhelming dual threat. Now rook to d8 check. Now king to e3 and rook to e8 check. Now king to d3, rook d8 check. King to c4 and rook e8. Now f6 check and king goes to g8. Rook to a2 supporting the pawn on e2. Now a rook to e6 attacking the pawn on f6. King to b5 trying to promote the pawn. Now rook to e5 check, at the same time attacking the h5 pawn. Now king goes to b6 and rook takes h5. Now c4 and rook to h1 and rook to b2 and rook c1. The final inaccuracy under severe time strain. Ding tries to stop the pawn from behind, but it's already too late. c5 and h5. Now c6 and king to h7. Now c7 and h4. Now rook to b5 and h3 and rook to h5 check, the same time attacking the pawn. Now king goes g6 and rook takes h3. Now king takes f6. Now rook to h8 and king to e6. With the c-pawn firmly protected and ready to promote on the next move, Theodorou plays a rook to h8. White is simply going to queen the pawn and black has no perpetual checks or counterplay left. Seeing that the house is completely on fire, Ding Liren gracefully resigned on this move. A massive scalp for Nikolas Theodorou against the former world champion. What an absolute masterclass in conversion by Nikolas, capitalizing beautifully on the world champion's time pressure errors and showing immaculate endgame technique. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to subscribe to my channel and hit like button and let me know your thoughts on this tactical queen sacrifice and Ding Liren's current form in the comments below. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next video.